The Raiders put the pads on for the first time during training camp, and there were some positives for both sides of the ball. We'll talk about that plus more on Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, July 31st, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. As always, if you're checking us out on YouTube, we appreciate that. The show has grown each and every day, and that's because of you, Raider Nation, and because of my man Ari, who does a fantastic job each and every day, making sure we're on YouTube, making sure we're looking good, we're sounding good, we're doing what we're supposed to do. We appreciate him. We shout him out. You can check him out on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And of course, we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. You want to be a part of the show, you can do that again by way of the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Your calls and texts will come up in segment number 3 of the show. Segment number 2, we'll hear from the great Eric Allen. Saw him at Raiders training camp on Tuesday and got an opportunity to catch up with him on my radio show that afternoon, just talking about what it's like to put the pads on for the first time. What is he seeing from the Raiders defense? What is he hearing from defensive coordinator Patrick Graham? And the unit that I think has really been the stars of training camp so far is the secondary. What does Eric Allen see in that Raiders secondary? You'll hear that conversation I had with him on my radio show, Unnecessary Roughness on Raider Nation Radio 920. You'll hear that coming up in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, news and notes of the day. Really just kind of a quick summary of what I saw from padded practice, and plus hearing from Antonio Pierce, the head coach who we met with before practice. We'll get into that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. So each and every day we arrive at training camp, we get to meet with a coach, a position coach, before practice, and then we meet with players following practice. So on Tuesday, we met with head coach Antonio Pierce. Following practice, we got to talk to Divine Diablo, Malcolm Kuntz, Thayer Munford, and also Dylan Parham. So let's go back to AP and what we got to talk with him about before practice, before the first padded practice, so you can anticipate AP was pretty excited, pretty fired up to have the opportunity to see his team with pads on for the first time. So off top, I asked him just what his expectations were from the first padded practice for the Raiders. Coach, pads go on today. What are you looking for? What are you expecting?
Expecting bang, bang. A lot of clatter, a lot of chatter. Guys excited. It's about time. We've been in pads since the spring. 7-on-7 is over. It's time for real football.
Bang, bang, clatter, and chatter. Bang, bang, clatter, and chatter. I like that right there. Antonio Pierce had a big smile on his face when he said that. He mentioned it. They hadn't had pads on for quite a while, and it was time to put the pads on. So he was excited about that opportunity. But who was it going to benefit the most? Like, the defense has already been playing really well. Was it going to be the offensive line? Was it going to be the running backs? Was it going to be the quarterbacks, right? Who was going to, or was the defense going to continue to dominate because they put the pads on? Here's Antonio Pierce on who he thought would benefit the most from having the pads on.
I think it's going to be the offense. If I had to predict today, I think the offensive line is going to get after it. Richie Incognito talked to the team last night. It was pretty intense. Whatever you think he said, he said.
So there you go. You hear AP talking about the offensive line, and he really believed that they were going to benefit the most. And for the most part, they did a really good job, I thought. Even when Thayer Munford went out and DJ Glaze, the rookie out of Maryland, had to slide into his position. Is it easy going up against Max Crosby? Of course not. But he had to do it for a little while until Thayer Munford came back. He had a little bit of a hand injury, but returned to practice and met with us after practice as well. So all is well when it comes to Thayer Munford. But I thought the offensive line did pretty well, right? Talking to Dylan Parham and Thayer Munford after practice, they were saying, they were happy to put the pads on because this whole offseason, really going back to OTAs and even mandatory minicamp, they haven't had any pads on. So the defensive line has been able to have their way with them, right? They've been able to pin their ears back and just get after the quarterback, and the offensive line has really been at their mercy. So at least on Tuesday, you saw the pushback. You saw the offensive line get a little angry at times, right? I mean, not to the point where there was any fights, but you could see that they were looking for that physicality. They weren't running from the physicality. They were looking to bring the physicality. They were also looking to open up holes in the running game. It was really good to see Zamir White, Amir Abdullah, to see Alexander Madison, Dylan Lobby, any running back that's on the roster, Britton Brown, all those guys out there really participating in the run game, getting behind their pads and try to establish the run. AP told us that we were going to see a lot of run on Tuesday, and we saw a lot of run on Tuesday. But what about the quarterbacks? Each and every show I talk about the quarterbacks and mention, is there a guy that has separated himself? Is there somebody who I felt like is a leader in the clubhouse for that job at the time? And so far, no. No quarterback has established themselves as a starting QB. So Antonio Pierce was asked, what do the quarterbacks need to do to be able to seize that starting job?
Right, everything. I think it's difficult when we didn't have pads on. There was a lot of things that I'm sure you saw and it looked like the defense is winning, but obviously you hope that would stop now with pads on, a little bit more resistant. But it goes back to it. Number one thing is taking care of the ball, putting the team in a position to win, managing the offense, understanding the operational. You saw some situational stuff there yesterday. I think our guys are doing a good job. Both quarterbacks have really embracing it. But again, I'm just go back to it. Somebody has to just separate from the other.
So there's Antonio Pierce right there on what it's going to take for one of the quarterbacks to earn that job. But as you heard him say there at the end, it's a matter of one of those guys just stepping up and taking it, right? At some point, one of those dudes, whether it's Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew, is going to have to walk on that practice field at the Jack Hammett Sports Complex and say, damn it, that's enough. Right? I'm going to take this job. It is mine. I'm the best guy for the job, and I'm going to show it starting right now. You know, I understand these guys are, they're friendly with each other. I understand these guys are pushing each other and trying to make each other better. But at some point, someone's got to go out there, put their stones on the table and say, no, this is my job. And I'm just waiting for that moment, whether it's going to be Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew. I'll tell you right now, Anthony Brown has been talked about, slightly as we're observing on the sidelines, not saying that he's going to be a guy competing for the starting job, but it does feel like that there could be some kind of role for him. I don't know exactly what that role is, so I can't answer that question right now, but I feel like there could be some kind of role for Anthony Brown, especially with the athleticism that he has. He has a strong arm, but just can't see him out there getting meaningful snaps as a guy who's going to be throwing the ball around the yard. But maybe there's a role for him as an athlete, as a guy that can make some plays with his legs on the team. I'm not 100% sure, but it just feels like Anthony Brown has a little something there for him. So just got a couple more sound bites from Antonio Pierce, what he had to say before the Raiders' first padded practice. And one is on the fact that the defense is making everything really difficult for the offense, like really difficult. They've been obviously the leaders in the clubhouse so far through training camp, and they did a good job again on Tuesday with the pads on as well, making life difficult. But here's AP on the defense being real good, making it tough on the offense.
Yeah, and I said that, the question was asked earlier in the week, why not do joint practice? I said, 'cause I think we got a pretty good defense to judge it on. And I think you guys have seen that. The defense is what you expect in year three, and when you got guys like Robert Spillane, Marcus Epps, Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins, and all those guys playing at a high level, and more importantly, communicating at a high level. And now Patrick's out there, he's playing Russian roulette, right? He's out there, he's just throwing it out there, playing dice, and these guys are just, they're making the calls and adjustments. A very tight-knit group. You can see the energy and excitement that they have for one another when they make plays. And they expect to dominate.
So there's Antonio Pierce just talking about that defense, and that's the main reason why they didn't have to have joint practices, right? He thinks that his team and his defense is really good, and he's going to make they're going to make the offense that much better as well if they got to go against them every single day in practice. So there's really no need to have joint practices because, well, they've got that tough unit in that Raiders defense across from them. So another question that I thought was important to ask is about JPJ. He's a guy that I talked about at the beginning of the week. I'd like to see him return. One, to see him come back before padded practices. It didn't happen on Monday. He didn't come back for padded practice on Tuesday, but before that practice, I did ask about an update on JPJ.
Yeah, he's on the pup list. Hopefully get him out here. I know he's looking good. Took the glasses off and kind of like getting out of cool mode and get ready back in football mode.
So short and to the point right there from Antonio Pierce. He's still on the pup list, and based off the description that he gave, clearly JPJ has a concussion, and that's not good. He's had a couple concussions going back to Oregon, and it's just when you get one and then you get another one, and you don't want to continue to do that. And I don't know when he suffered that concussion, but hate that he did. And I know that Tom Telesco said he's going to be out there sooner rather than later, but now we're looking at Wednesday. Right, and you heard AP talk about it. He took the glasses off. Right, he's trying to get back into football mode. So we'll see what happens. But when AP gave that answer, I knew there was some questions on what the exact injury was. Originally, I thought it was a shoulder injury. Then I was told it wasn't a shoulder injury, and AP just confirmed right there that it was a concussion for Jackson Powers Johnson. Very unfortunate. He needs to be out there getting as many reps as possible. And the other concern is, again, obviously, this is a very physical game. The offensive line is a very physical position. So, hate to see a guy have multiple concussions at that position because they just get easier and easier and easier to get once you've had a couple. The final soundbite that I want you to hear from Antonio Pierce as he met with us before practice on Tuesday was a question he had been asked about Nate Hobbs and the plays that he made, and the fact that when he met with the media on Monday, he was mad because he had a couple pass breakups but didn't come up with the interception. And he was mad about the interception that he let hit the ground. He had it right there in his hands, and it hit the ground, so he was upset about that. Plus a follow-up from me about the secondary in general, who, as I mentioned before, I believe has been the best unit so far out there in training camp, both sides of the ball.
Yeah, PBUs are cool. Interceptions are great. Turn that ball over is something we want to do, and then we want to take it the other way. You saw that at the end of the season. Our defense really took a lot of pride in scoring defensive touchdowns, and that's the mindset now. And I think Nate understands that. This is a big year for Nate, right? Contract year, fourth year. We expect a lot from Nate. Nate can do a lot of things. Nate's a special player because he can cover, he's explosive, but more importantly in the run game, and you'll see that today, he's physical. And he's a big asset for our team.
You mentioned Nate Hobbs and how special he could be. What about just the rest of the secondary? They look like they're flying around making plays and got a little swag to them.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, it starts with Trayvon and Marcus Epps. I mean, they've really set the tone. They bonded from day one since Epps got here. His communication and what they do in between plays, what they do pre-practice, post-practice, that continuity in that group is really what you want, right? I'll be honest, when I first got here, 3 years ago, the DB group, that room's a little shaky. It wasn't a tight-knit group. Everybody's independent contractors. Now we don't see that. We see a group playing together, really enjoying each other's success. And when the opportunity's there for them to make a play, they're making those plays. And our safeties, all of them have made a play this, 4 practices in, either interception or some kind of play that's impacted the game. So I love the breakdown right there that Antonio Pierce had to say, obviously about Nate Hobbs and how important this year is and what he brings to the table. But I love when he was just talking about the secondary in general and starts talking about Marcus Epps, right, and how him and Trayvon Merrick really kind of are the leaders in the clubhouse when it comes to that secondary. Like we look at Jack Jones, we look at Nate Hobbs, we look at JB, we look at Brandon Faison, right? We even talk about other guys like D-Cam Richardson, right, the rookie. We look at him, and it really starts on the back end and Marcus Epps with the communication that he brings to the table. And it was really good to hear that because a lot of folks look and go back and look at the stats and say, yeah, Marcus Epps didn't do anything his first year with the Raiders, but he really did. Right, and he even helped other guys get better. As a matter of fact, you'll hear Eric Allen coming up in segment number 2 talk about what Marcus Epps brings to the table and how he even helped Robert Spillane. That's part of the conversation I had with EA, Eric Allen. You'll hear that conversation coming up in segment number 2. But overall, quick summary of what I saw on Tuesday in the first padded practice. It was a better day all around. For the offense in general. The defense continued to play and do some really good things, but the offense made a few plays here and there. Again, it wasn't anything that was earth-shattering or I got to write home about it. And it's like, oh, man, they figured it out now. There were still some moments where there were some bad passes. Trey Tucker put one on the ground. He had got behind Nate Hobbs. Could have been a big play. Aiden O'Connell dropped the ball right where it needed to be. Tucker put it on the ground. Another pass went to Devontae Adams. Thought it was a pretty good pass. Thought Devontae should have hauled it in. It was dropped, but then a pass interference was called on the play. And I'll stay right now. I think it was a little suspect pass interference, but that's just me. And then there was moments where there was some good passes. Jacoby Myers continues to be a really good player. Brock Bowers continues to be a guy that, they're trying to get the ball to consistently. Michael Mayer, same thing. Saw some good things from the running games. Right, the Zamir White, I thought he did a really good job. Dylan Lobby, I like him a lot. Saw some good things from him. Alexander Madison, as long as he doesn't fumble the ball like he did last year in Minnesota, Alexander Madison is going to be a hell of a player
for the Raiders. That combination, that 1-2 punch between Zamir White and Alexander Madison could be really good as long as he's not putting the ball on the ground like he did in Minnesota. Dylan Lobby, I mentioned him, kind of went over him kind of quickly, but I think he's going to really butter his bread by way of special teams early on, but I do think you'll see him get involved offensively. And I did like the fact that in the practice on Tuesday, the Raiders did just about anything they could to get the ball into their playmakers' hands, even handed the ball to them out of the backfield, like a Jacoby Myers, a Devontae Adams, a Brock Bowers, jet sweep, stuff like that. They're trying to get creative, Luke Getsy and company. So, again, overall, was it a fantastic day by the offense? No, but you could see that it was a little bit better. It was a lot of emphasis on the run game, and you could see the offensive line with the pads on was obviously a lot more comfortable than they were with no pads on, and the defensive line coming after him like that. But you got to hear the conversation I had with Eric Allen. Saw him at the practice facility, and it's always great to sit there and pick his brain and hear what he's got to say. And we had a really good conversation later on in the afternoon on my radio show. You'll hear that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. We'll get to that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. It makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. They've got great last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guaranteed. Game Time will take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. And you know what? You can get any kind of tickets, concerts, comedy, theater, sporting events, whatever the case may be. They have got you covered. Game Time is the place for you. Save up to 60% off of buying last-minute tickets. They've got the exclusive in-app deals. They've got the zone deals, all-in prices. You can see your actual seats. You can see the view from your seats before you buy them, and they've got the lowest price guarantee. You want to make sure you have that. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you don't get the lowest price. Right now, take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets and any kind of tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 with today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Went a little long there in segment number 1 as you heard from head coach Antonio Pierce, and did a quick little recap as well from what I saw from Tuesday's padded practice. But wanted to get into this conversation, deep dive into this conversation I had with Eric Allen on my radio show on Tuesday. It was fantastic. I really like to bring conversations like this to the podcast anytime I feel like I had a really, really good one, and the one with Eric Allen on Tuesday was fantastic. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. Start off talking about the first day of pads being on and what that kind of means to a player that's doing it for the first time, or the first time that year, obviously. So here's that conversation I had on Tuesday with the great Eric Allen. Today was the first day of pads for Raiders practice number 5 in their training camp. For you as a player, you did this a long time. What was it like the first time you put those pads on and went out there for practice?
Oh, well, you were ready to get after it. I mean, with the defenses that we had and almost every stop I was at, it was our opportunity to kind of dominate and take over. You go from the field, then you get the fans involved in it, the coaches is talking smack to each other. The first day of pads is one of those days where I tried to slip on the field today, Q, and just try to get my foot on there when they were going on 7-on-7 or team. But, again, it's a great day. You know Max is going to be all with it because we're led by that defensive line. But today, first day in pads, defense always wins.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And you mentioned to me that, you were over around Patrick Graham, kind of getting in his back pocket to kind of hear what he had to say. How intense has Patrick Graham been, in your opinion, so far in training camp?
Well, very confident, and has a great understanding of the players that he has in those places and what they can do. I think the end of last year, and I keep going back to this, the development of certain players had really take that jump were evident because Coach Antonio Pierce really gave the opportunity for his position coaches and coordinators to really coach to his style. And I think that was the really great difference. We saw that huge jump by Malcolm Kuntz, and I think this year we're going to see a jump by either Jacorian Bennett or one of those cornerbacks, taking that next step to be able to be on the other side of the great Jack Jones.
Eric Allen is with us here on Raider Nation Radio 920, Unnecessary Roughness. I'm so glad you brought up Jacorian Bennett, JB. He's a guy that spoke with us the other day after practice, and, he kind of has a little bit of extra edge to him. He's not quite the, I don't want to say shy guy that he was his rookie year, but you can see that he's evolving. What have you seen as far as JB evolving on the field?
The most important thing, Q, is he's becoming a cerebral football player. And, man, that bodes well for a young guy who still has a lot of athletic ability in him. So once you kind of marry those two, a guy who understands the game, route combinations and those type of things, and then he's able to still show that great speed and athleticism, that's the kind of player who can take a huge jump when you're talking about a rookie who had the opportunity to start last year, banged up a little bit, ups and downs. But it just seems like with this coaching staff, being able to evaluate them, giving them things that they can use to enhance their game from almost week to week, I'm expecting him to take a huge jump, particularly when Antonio wants his players to really play in preseason. Because we're not asking for these guys. We know there's a process, but we want that process to be almost immediate for this football team, particularly defensively, to be one of the top defenses in the AFC, and we're expecting that this year.
They have the ability to do it. The talent is all there. And, I'm a guy, as you know, I pay attention to the secondary a lot. And something changed in that locker room and in that secondary room when Jack Jones arrived last year. It's just like the energy changed, the swag changed, even the confidence level seems like it raised a little bit. From your expert eye, what did you see from that room once Jack Jones arrived last year?
There's no doubt about it. And I think everybody in the building understands it. The fan base understands it. Jack is the guy in the meeting rooms. He's the guy in that cornerback room in particular. And how he goes, that's how everyone else has to kind of perform. So you're going to see Nate Hobbs on the practice field with a little more confidence, kind of doing his thing in between plays, making plays, letting people know that he's the guy. That room has really, really gathered around Jack Jones's ability to make plays. And one thing that I'm not going to let people miss on is Jack is the kind of player who's going to study you in film, get a couple great opportunities for himself, and then when he sees those things, the lineup, the pre-snap movement, situational football, don't just think that Jack is just this athletic freak who's just taking chances out there. People need to know this guy understands the game of football. He loves the game. He's passionate about the game, and it shows throughout the week and how he prepares. And that, more than anything, Q, is going to be the deciding factor on how these other guys, Bennett, Richardson, everyone else, kind of how fast they get caught up to the great Jack Jones.
It's funny that you mentioned that last year Nate Hobbs told me the guy who studies the film the best in that room is Jack Jones. That was his words to me. He said nobody studies film in our room better than Jack Jones. So when he goes and jumps a route against the Chargers in that 63-point performance that they put up, he saw it coming before the ball was ever snapped because of that film study you're talking about.
Hey, I tell you, Q, you could talk all you want. A coach, you could have the greatest coach ever, but when a young player, sits in a meeting room and sees a guy like Jack kind of preparing and like, oh, yeah, you see this right here? Man, I'm going to jump that. And then Monday, after the game, after he has jumped that route, there's no better coaching tape. There's no better just kind of flat-out point that you can make than a guy who studies and then on Sunday makes the play, and on Monday you go in, you sit down, you may be a young guy, you're sitting next to him, and you're like, yeah, you know what's going to happen right now, watch on this film, and he gets a great pick on a break or even a breakup, whatever the case may be. It's nothing like having a guy you watch during the week and then on Monday sitting in and watching film and seeing how it all played out and having him make those plays, not just with his athletic ability, but with his mental approach to the game. It's just great how Jack has really taken over this secondary room.
The great Eric Allen is with us here on Raider Nation Radio 920, Unnecessary Roughness. I asked AP before practice today about the secondary in general because they look like, and you've been there, they're flying around this practice field. And he told me that one of the biggest keys was Marcus Epps. Like everything that he does might not show up in the stat sheet and be like a big turnover or something, but he gets that whole secondary right. What have you seen from Marcus Epps on the back end?
Yeah, he's that safety who we all think about being a smart guy, always lined up in the right plus spot. And if he was in like khakis and a polo shirt, you wouldn't know who this guy was, right? He's standing
Right.
next to you. But when you're talking about a player who's another creative guy who understands kind of the game, the passing concepts, always lines up in the right place. More importantly for him, he's a great communicator. And I think that has really translated itself into a lot of plays being made, not just in the secondary, but at the linebacker spot too. We saw Spillane make some plays last year, getting picks and things like that. That has a lot to do with what Epps is doing in the middle of the football field, because those two positions, safeties and linebackers, in today's game, you guys have to be on the same page. You guys have to communicate, and some of those routes in the middle of the football field, either I'm taking it as a safety or you're taking it as a linebacker, but we both have a great idea of what's coming based on the situation and what kind of formation the offense is lined up in.
I know it's early in training camp. It's only been 5 practices, but is there a player or two that you feel like kind of is flying under the radar that you got your eye on that you think can really help contribute for the Raiders this year?
Yeah, both of us kind of go back to Bennett, goes back to Richardson. That secondary on the other side, that's probably the most important defensive spot on defense is that opposite corner. Nate Hobbs has been playing lights out. I think the ability for him to just understand, I'm going to be the nickel guy. I don't have to worry about outside. As of right now, I'm the nickel guy. He has been playing really good in the run game and in the passing game, of course. But when you see a guy and you're playing so much nickel now anyway, so much sub package because offenses are, have 3 receivers, 4 receivers. So a guy who can line up really give you opportunities to cover that receiver in the slot, match up with the tight end in the slot, and then being able to set the edge. And I think that's so important, and we don't really pay much attention to that outside of the coaches. But if you talk to a defensive coach, Q, the first thing he's going to say is, we got to set the edge. We got to set the edge. And I tell you, Nate Hobbs does a really good job at setting the edge for a defensive back.
Yeah, you sound like you can go out there and do some coaching to yourself right now. You sound like you can coach him up.
That's all that. Hey, I was soaking it up from Coach Graham today. Just soaking it up.
I know that's right. Hey, we'll close out with this. You mentioned DeCam Richardson, the young corner. That he's a rookie this year. He's got size. AP's talked about the speed he's got. Looks like he's raw, but he's got the ability. Again, it's early on. It's only been a handful of practices. What are you seeing from DeCam?
I just hope that he continues to develop, because he has all the measurables you would want from a cornerback. It's just that now you kind of see it every day. You got to practice the way a pro practice, study, take care of your body, and hopefully sometime in preseason he gets some opportunities to go up against some of these outstanding receivers, make some plays, and then the confidence there. Confidence not there yet for like in-game stuff, but man, he looks really good, and hopefully he's able to develop a little faster because of this coaching staff doing an outstanding job of evaluating players and helping them develop a little bit faster.
Really good stuff right there from EA. Always love talking to him. I feel like I learned so much from him, whether it's at Allegiant Stadium before the pregame show, whether it's at the practice facility, whenever I get a chance to see him or have him as a guest on my radio show, as I did on Tuesday. EA is very generous with his time, and I definitely appreciate him, and hopefully you enjoyed that conversation as well. I thought it was very meaningful. Had many people hit me up after that conversation on Tuesday. I was like, man, that was fantastic stuff with EA. So hopefully you feel the same way. But we're going to know what you feel and what you're feeling about training camp, the quarterback position, and a lot more. We'll find out coming up in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts at 707-654-4693. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about FanDuel, and anyone who's listened to me for any amount of time knows how much I love sports. I love me some sports, even sports that I don't understand. I love, right? Love to play them, love to watch them. And some of the sports that are going on in the Olympics right now, I don't understand them at all, but I'm going to watch them. And it just gives me another excuse to watch more sports and even having an opportunity to play sports if I possibly can. And we know during the summer, it's a whole lot of baseball. Right, and we're lucky with the Olympics, but outside of the Olympics, normally it's a whole lot of baseball. You get some WNBA action, and really not too much more after that. But FanDuel, they're hooking us up. They let me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I got to do is open up the app, and I can dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. So this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. Go over to FanDuel.com right now. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts draft that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start off with a text from Chico Raider. It says, hey, Q, still loving the program during these dog days of summer. Last weekend, I heard enough of Darren Waller on the Rush podcast with Max Crosby. Max said that he missed making music and wished he had the time to do it, and Waller replied, you have the time. That's an arrogant dude to be telling Crosby anything. Stay away from these Raiders. Waller, not a fan. Go Raiders. That's Chico Hondo, and he said, thoughtful boy. So there you go. Not mad at that at all. And hey, thanks for the text. I appreciate you. And I mean, look, I'm a fan of Darren Waller. Everybody is not built to just have like a one-track mind and just football. Darren Waller is a guy that he needs other things in his life. And yeah, I mean, Max Crosby does have time to do other things if he so chooses to. But Max Crosby is dedicated to what he can do. He wants to play football. Obviously, he's dedicated to his podcast. He's got some other things that he's got working on as well. And I mean, he's told us before how much, how his days go and how busy he is all the time. But I don't hold anything against Darren Waller. He gave the Raiders some good years of his career. His career obviously was really cut short. The Raiders traded him to the Giants, clearly won that side of the trade, and now he's retired. So I don't really hold anything against him. He's been around Vegas. He's been even at the Aces game, even though he's got the divorce with Kelsey Plum. He's been around them as of late and before they went on their break. So again, I don't hold anything against that dude, and I hope that he's always going to be right, because he's fighting a fight every day that luckily all of us don't have to fight, because that is a tough one. So shout out to Darren Waller. Hopefully he's doing okay. Up next is a call from Raider Dave in Denver. He's calling real quick to talk about the Raiders draft classes as of late, something he heard Vinny Bonsignore talking about on the morning show on Raider Nation Radio 920. Here he is, Raider Dave in Denver.
Raider Dave in Denver here. I was listening to the morning show, and I think Vinny might bring up a good question inadvertently. He was making a point about how good the Raiders draft has been, which I completely disagree, and I think he's stretching on the point. But it does bring up the fact that how many holes does the Raiders have in their roster where they don't need rookies to really excel this year versus what they needed last year? In other words, how many rookies are in their sophomore season right now with the Raiders that actually would start on another team? Mayer, I guess, possibly. I don't even know that he would be a deadbolt starter for any other team. But if the Raiders have been doing better draft-wise, I think the question is, how many of those Raider rookies, those Raider draftees, would actually be starting on another team? I think it's a great question. Anyway, see you.
Raider Dave, thanks for the call. I appreciate you, and I'd agree. I don't think the Raiders have been great drafting, right? I think that the last couple of years they've done better for sure. We'll continue to learn about some of these players, but I mean, even Dave Ziegler's first draft class, I say it a lot, and I know some Raider Nation doesn't like it. That's okay. I'm fine with that. I think his first draft class, when he traded for Devontae Adams and ended up drafting Zamir White and Dylan Parham and Thayer Munford, right? And I think that was a good thing. I think that draft class was pretty good. Zamir White's now a starter. He got Dylan Parham's been a starter since day one. Thayer Munford looks like he's going to be a starter at right tackle. And, of course, Devontae Adams was acquired then as well. Last year's draft, there's still, TBD, right? Tyree Wilson, what he's going to be. Michael Mayer, I think that he's done some really good things, and he's going to continue to grow, especially this year with Brock Bowers. Byron Young, third-round pick out of Alabama, not too sure. But Ja'Cory Bennett, he looks better. He looks like he's going to be a guy that's going to be a contributor this year at a pretty high level. Excited about him. And, some other guys as well. So I think that they're doing a better job. But the one thing that you could tell from the Raiders, and that's when you know that their draft classes haven't been fantastic, is they don't have depth. They have, first-string talent, but they don't really have depth because they missed, I should say, on a lot of draft picks that they should have been hitting on. So, they need to continue to stack really good draft classes, and obviously we won't know what this draft class looks like until, we'll see what this year looks like, and then, maybe another year before we could really determine if that was a hit or not. But thanks so much for that call. Definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a text from LA Raider Steve. Says, Q, what's up, my guy? So we're excited for the quickly approaching season. Me, I'm tempering my expectation. Reason being is because we have not one, but two of our main cogs from our offensive line on the PUP list. Doesn't matter who's throwing the rock or who's running the rock if we have a subpar offensive line blocking for them. We need JPJ and Colton to get healthy and stay healthy. I pray that our twos backing them up can get the job done until both are NFL game ready. I'm not being a hater, just being realistic. Thanks for all that you do. That's LA Raider Steve, and I'm not mad at you. I'm not calling you a hater. I think you're spot on. I think that's a big concern is the fact that those two dudes are on the PUP list to start. Even with, it sounds like JPJ is going to be coming back sooner rather than later. We don't know when Colton Miller is going to come back, but they're not having time to gel together. Regardless when they come back, and regardless that Colton Miller's been in the league for a long time, he hasn't played next to that guy yet. Talking about JPJ, and JPJ hasn't played next to Andre James yet. And Dylan Parham's moving from left guard to right guard, even though that's his more comfortable position, more his natural position. And, oh, by the way, Thayer Munford is new. So, no, you're not wrong. That offensive line has got to be solid. They can't wait till week 5 to figure it out. They got to get it done sooner rather than later. And them being out to start training camp on the PUP list is not good. So you're spot on. I hope they hurry up and come back as well. Just got time for a couple more. This one's coming from Lodi Cali Raider. He calls talking about a player I spent a lot of time talking about on my radio show on Tuesday, that 6th-round pick, Dylan Lobby, the running back out of New Hampshire. Here he is, Lodi Cali Raider.
What up, team? Just wanted to talk about Dylan Lobby. The kid's impressing everybody. A while back when he got drafted, I was pumped up. I even called his show, bragging about the fact that he was a new favorite player. I saw his tape and what he can do, and the dude's amazing. He's not disappointing. I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to take over Zeus, because he's not. He's going to compliment him nicely, though. Obviously, Madison has the number 2 spot, but don't be surprised if Dylan can surpass that, because of his just ability to catch the ball. Madison is really good at that, but Dylan is impressing everybody. Anyways, love everything you do. Thank you for covering the Raiders out Costa Mesa. What a California Raider out.
Lodi Cali, thanks for the call. And yeah, man, I believe he's going to contribute quite a bit for the Raiders this season. Special teams, he's going to butter his bread. I mentioned it before. I think he's going to be a special teams ace. But I think offensively he's going to be good as well. Matter of fact, I made a bet with Vic Tafer from The Athletic on Tuesday at training camp, because I think that he's going to take the role of Amir Abdullah, and Vic doesn't think he will just yet. He's like, I think not his first year, right? He probably will at some point, but not yet. But just the way that they try to get him the ball at practice, the way that they focus in on him during special teams, I think that they like Dylan Lobby. And, oh, by the way they talk about him as well, I think they really like what he brings to the table. So for me, I see him taking the role of Amir Abdullah. Amir had about 35 touches last year offensively, and of course he did some things special teams wise. So I'm looking at maybe 35 to 40 touches for Dylan Lobby, whether it's receiving passes out of the backfield, running the rock between the tackles, or whatever the case may be, and then on top of that, being a special teams ace as well. So that's a guy that I'm pretty high on right now, and I'm interested to see what it looks like once the season rolls around. We'll close things out with a text from Raider Chuck. He said, "What's up, Q? It's Raider Chuck. I've been a long-time listener, and this is my first time texting. I have to say I enjoy the show and what you do. I want to say I agree with you about us having to make the playoffs for the season to be a success. I think it's too early to push the panic button for the offense. They may be up against the best defense in the league, and they're still learning a new offense and doing red zone drills, which is tough anyway. I want to see them in the preseason against a defense that doesn't see their plays every day before we start to judge. I think O'Connell will take the job and continue to improve. I think we'll get around 11 wins, maybe 12. I have a question for you. AP said he, along with Getsy and Telesco, will decide on the starter. Do you think that it's odd for the GM to be involved in that decision? That's from Raider Chuck. And thanks so much for that. I appreciate you. Thanks so much for being a longtime listener as well and chiming in for the first time. But no, I don't think it's strange or odd that Telesco's being part of it. I think he's just part of the brain trust. Again, a guy that's been there, done that for a long time in the National Football League. I think it's just getting his opinion, right, and getting his thoughts on what he's looking at. And Telesco has mentioned multiple times that he's trying not to evaluate early in training camp because he wants to get these guys to let them get their legs under them. But he's deferring to the coaching staff, right? He's deferring to AP and Luke Getsy. But I think that he does appreciate being part of the process and just listening and giving his feedback on what he's seeing and what he thinks fits best for this team. So We know the two guys that are competing for the job, Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. I mentioned it earlier. Neither one of the guys have separated themselves in who should be that starting quarterback. And I'm hoping sooner rather than later somebody starts to. I want nothing more than to come back to this show and be like, man, today was the day. Today was the day I saw it when Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew took control of that starting quarterback position. But thanks so much for that text. I do appreciate you. That's all I got time for on today's show. Jake from Massachusetts, I'll get your call tomorrow. Get some more texts as well. We're going to be talking to Tom McMahon today before practice. He's a special teams coordinator, so I'm looking forward to that, as special teams has been a heavy emphasis at training camp so far through 5 days. Not sure if they're going to put the pads on again today. Maybe they'll just have shells on, or something, or maybe they won't do any of that. Maybe they'll just go in shorts and helmets and a shirt. We'll see, right? We'll find out sooner rather than later what it's going to look like. And, of course, we'll be talking about it here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. If you're trying to find out information on any other team in the National Football League, of course, we got it covered like a glove. All 32 teams on the Locked On Podcast Network, over 200 shows covering many different sports from many different hosts, all fantastic work. The Locked On Podcast Network, very proud to be a small part of the monster that is the network. Do a fantastic job. So anything you need to check out, pretty sure the Locked On Podcast Network has you covered. Of course, they're your team every day. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.